Okay, I'm right back. It's Esther, and we're in the middle of chapter 2. So I'm just going to keep reading where I left off. Okay, let me move this around here. Hold on. Here we go. Okay, so it was when the king's command and decree were heard, and when many young women were gathered at Shushan the citadel under the custody of Haggai, that Esther also was taken to the king's palace into the care of Haggai, the custodian of the women. Now the young woman pleased him, and she obtained his favor. So he readily gave beauty preparations to her, besides her allowance. Then 7 choice maidservants were provided for her from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maidservants to the best place in the house of the women. So what we see here is this Haggai. He favored her. He could see, merits in her that he didn't, because he saw them all. So he would be a good one to screen out, and he liked her the best. And that's why he put her in a spot of favor. So that's what he does. And this could be symbolic of different things, but this will unfold more as we go along, and then you'll see here. Esther had not revealed her people or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. And every day Mordecai paced in front of the court of the women's quarters, to learn of Esther's welfare and what was happening to her. Okay, so he's the one that told her not to reveal, her like Jewish lineage and heritage, and gave her another name publicly. And I would think he was maybe a little bit worried, maybe the situation wasn't real great, and he was a bit concerned, and that's why he's the one who maybe thought, oh, it's a good idea if she goes into this thing and maybe will become queen, and thought that she would be discriminated against that way. So he told her just for the purposes of that to hide her identity so she'd have a better chance. Maybe it was that. So I don't know. It's not real clear, but he does tell her this. And she does it. You'll see. Okay. Each young woman's turn came to go in to King Ahasuerus after she had completed 12 months' preparation according to the regulations for the women. For thus were the days of their preparation apportioned: 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and preparations for beautifying women. I'll explain this in a bit. Thus prepared, each young woman went to the king, and she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the women's quarters to the king's palace. In the evening she went. Okay, wait a minute. All right, yeah, in the evening she went, and in the morning she returned to the second house of the women, to the custody of Shashgaz, the king's eunuch who kept the concubines. She would not go in to the king again unless the king delighted in her and called for her by name. Okay, so this was their process of selection here. So anyway, now what's interesting is this was a 1-year period, preparation period of beautification and purification as well, really. And I looked this up. Well, I'll get to that, but this is symbolic for, like, as Christians, the sanctification process. It's a process, and it's probably more than a year, but uh, you know, it does have this effect of purifying and beautifying, not physically, of course, but you become more Christ like, and you're being prepared as well as the bride of Christ. So that's definitely symbolic, okay? And I looked up this about the myrrh oil and myrrh, and I found out that, okay, myrrh means bitter, and it's a bitter herb, and it has a bitter taste, and it symbolizes bitterness, suffering, death, purification. Okay, it symbolizes all of that. And this is all part of the sanctification process as well. That's not all that's part of it, but that is part of it. And there's a lot of stuff we go through that is pretty bitter, you got to admit, right? And persecution, all that stuff. So I did videos about this also. So anyway, a few more things about myrrh is it was also symbolic for the cross, like the crucifixion, and we also carry our cross. And myrrh oil was used as a sacred anointing oil in the tabernacle days. Myrrh was given as a gift to Jesus when he was an infant by the three wise men. It was frankincense, myrrh, and gold. So they gave him myrrh, and it was prophetic for, each thing was prophetic for something. And that was prophetic for the suffering part. And during the burial, they anoint them with myrrh oil also. So there's a lot of symbolism, a lot of symbolic meaning in the myrrh. And also, I looked up properties of myrrh, and it turns out it's almost like a medicine, and it kills bacteria, and it has that kind of property, like against growth of bad things, and it has healing properties. It helps you heal. So I found all that very interesting about myrrh. So that would make sense. See, so it's all symbolic. It's so neat if you really dig in. Okay, so that is that part of it. Now, when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, to go in to the king, she requested nothing but what Hegai, the king's eunuch, the custodian of the women, advised. Okay, so this was a smart move, because this Hegai would know what the king would have wanted, right? And he advised the women what to take. They had a choice. They could take anything from that selection, but the wisest thing is to take what was advised, because, the chances would be better for her that, she'd be liked, because, those were the things. I don't know what they were, Maybe it was a certain kind of perfume, but, if that's what he liked, chances are better if you're wanting to be queen. You just take that perfume, at least for that day. I mean, my goodness, right? So anyway, and it showed that she was willing to do these things, right? So there's that. And that's what she did. So it shows, she's obedient, and in a sense of what it represents, it's important in that way. The church needs to be obedient to the Lord. I mean, that's kind of obvious. Nobody should be arguing about that. So, all right. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. I looked up Tebeth, and it turns out their months go differently, so it would be from the middle of December to the middle of January. I don't know why that's important. I just wondered. Okay, the king, here we go. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Okay, so there's that again. Then the king made a great feast, the feast of Esther, for all his officials and servants, and he proclaimed a holiday in the provinces and gave gifts according to the generosity of a king. So he seemed really happy that he found her, and she got this privilege. So anyway, so there's that. So she gets chosen, she becomes queen, and she replaces Vashti. Okay. So now they have a big party. Okay. Now, so that is pretty much that part of it, with the whole king and queen and that kind of thing. There's another part that shows up later a couple of times, and then I'll refer to that. But this now begins the section about all the intrigue and conspiracy that's going on then. So you'll see. Now, when virgins were gathered together a second time, Mordecai sat within the king's gate. Now Esther had not revealed her family and her people, just as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther obeyed the command of Mordecai as when she was brought up by him. He had his reasons. In those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gate, two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, doorkeepers, became furious and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So the matter became known to Mordecai, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when an inquiry was made into the matter, it was confirmed, and both were hanged on a gallows, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Okay, so Mordecai discovers a plot against the king, that these two eunuchs were trying to kill him. He tells Esther, Esther tells the king, so he is safe, he doesn't get hurt. And then they look into it and they find out it's true, so they punish the two guys and hang them on the gallows. So they're dead. Okay, so there's that. It was written in the book that Mordecai was the one who exposed this plot. And that's all they do so far, okay? And there's more on that later. That's why I'm really mentioning what's happening here in detail. So keep that in the back pocket. Now, chapter 3, Haman's conspiracy against the Jews. So here we go. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. Okay, now Haman, before we go on, Haman, turns out he's also going to be a type of, he's a type of the devil. He could be a type of the Antichrist, and he's definitely a type of some of these former dictators that showed up on the world stage. You would recognize it if you know history at all. So, okay, it'll get interesting. So now, here we go. But Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. I'll get back to that. Then the king's servants who were within the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" Now it happened, when they spoke to him daily, and he would not listen to them, that they told it to Haman to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. I'll get back to this. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, Haman was filled with wrath. So, yeah, you see, he wants like worship. He's not getting it. He's filled with wrath. I mean, that's like typically the devil. There's more. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. So he gets so mad. He doesn't just want to go after Mordecai. He decides to go after all of his people, okay, all the Jews in the whole land, the territory of Ahasuerus, to go after them. So you can see, that's definitely one of many things in a pattern there, that this has happened. So here it is again. Now, this thing, it made him so furious. Well, Mordecai could not bow to Haman or give any kind of homage to him, because that would be idolatry. That's a form of worship. And today, as Christians, we can't do that either, see? And the Jews couldn't do this either. Back then, they couldn't do that. It's just, one of those things. And like today, as Christians, we can't do this either. You can't bow to anyone, only to God, and do homage to anyone. So it's a form of worship. And this is why many of the early Christians were martyred, because they refused. It's betraying Jesus and all that, and they refused, and that's why they were martyred, and they were just as adamant about it as I am. So that's anyway how it needs to be. And so that's the whole background on that, okay? So just know you can't do that. Okay. Now, in the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is, the lot, before Haman to determine the day and the month, until it fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. So this is like casting lots, apparently, throwing dice to find out, what day you're going to pick or whatever. Okay. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all other peoples, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore, it is not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work to bring it into the king's treasuries. So this was like even a little bribe in a way. He just wanted to see these people dead at any cost, and that was what he was willing to do. Now, and of course he lies. I mean, yes, the laws are different, but is it a problem? No. So he paints it all bad. And they need to go, and it's bad, and this and that, and that's it. And so, and unfortunately, King Ahasuerus, he doesn't look into the matter at all. He just trusts Haman, and he gets taken by this. And how many times has this come up? There's a decree, and he signs it, and then he's in trouble, right? So this has happened before, so they really, like with Daniel and that kind of thing, so they really need to investigate a little more before they go signing these decrees. But anyway, he's one of those that didn't do the diligent homework, and he just went ahead, puts a stamp on it, that's it. So unfortunately, they weren't very much into research, I guess. So sadly, okay, so that's what happened so far. Okay, now so the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. Okay, so, and the king said to Haman, the money and the people are given to you to do with them as seems good to you. So again, he just takes his word for it, doesn't investigate, All right. Then the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and a decree was written according to all that Haman commanded, to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, to the officials of all people, to every province according to its script, so all their languages, and to every people in their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus it was written and sealed with the king's signet ring, and the letters were sent by couriers into all the king's provinces to destroy. Let me move this up. To destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. A copy of the document was to be issued as law in every province, being published for all people, that they should be ready for that day. I mean, does this sound familiar or what, right? If you know history. So the couriers went out, hastened by the king's command, and the decree was proclaimed in Shushan the citadel. So the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. So they were even like, what? Right? Why would they want to do this? So, yeah. So it goes on. Okay. Now, chapter 4. When Mordecai learned all that had happened, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the city. He cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went as far as the front of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province where the king's command and decree arrived, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her, and the queen was deeply distressed. Then she sent garments to clothe Mordecai and take his sackcloth away from him, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend. Her, and she gave him a command concerning Mordecai, to learn what and why this was. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the city square that was in front of the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries to destroy the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction, which was given at Shushan, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and that he might command her to go in to the king to make supplication to him and plead before him for her people. So Hathach returned and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a command for Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court to the king, who has not been called, he has but one law: put all to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to go in to the king for these 30 days. So they told Mordecai Esther's words. Okay, so in a nutshell here, she'd love to do it, but she's just worried, like, she can die in the process, which to me sounds really weird, because if he loves Esther so much and they're married, wouldn't she have the right to approach him and, like, he's not going to put her to death? So they must have had some strange laws. I don't know. And then this thing about they haven't seen each other in 30 days. That's a month. I don't know. Anyway, all these things that you hear sometimes about people at higher levels like that, like, it doesn't really sound all that good, right? Like, I wouldn't want this. I honestly wouldn't. Like, if I were living at that time, I'd be like, nah, that's okay. I'm happy this way. I'll just marry a regular guy and all that. But yeah, and I even found out during the research on this process, they said that, imagine all the women, right, from this large land, and they all, once he picks one, and they had different numbers of possible amounts of women that could have been there. But let's say 500. I don't know. You never know. But it's just an example. Of course, he only picks one. And then you would think, okay, the others can go about their merry way and go on with their lives and, have a normal life, get married, have a family, whatever. They said no, they're kept as concubines in the king's custody, and they probably never see him again, and they can't get married either to anybody else. They're kind of a prisoner. And that would be the rest of these women. And what are the chances you'd be the one picked, even, right? And then if you are picked, look, they haven't even come together for a month, right? I don't know. No, I'd be like, no, 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 you go ahead. You go right ahead, you know. I'm good. Anyway, some of these things you find just bizarre. But anyway, so the bottom line is she's worried for her life, you know. And then this other part here almost sounds this inner court, you know, like you can lose your life. And she approaches the king. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of the temple and the Holy of Holies, and the part where the high priest goes in once a year, and he can die, by the way, if it's unworthy or something. So then they pull him out by a string, like they had to tie a string to his foot or his toe. I forgot the details, but you know, I'll go over it later. But yeah, so it reminded me of that. And here she is. She does agree. Well, okay, let me go on and then I'll get to that. So they tell Mordecai what Esther said. Now, and Mordecai told them to answer Esther, do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. Like, don't think you're safe because you're queen. So, for if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? And this is true. I mean, this is how it works. You know, he's absolutely right, Mordecai. And then she wants to, she's just worried, but she realizes she has to take this risk. Anyway, and this is quoted all the time, you know, you've come to this place for such a time as this, right? And this is so true also. I mean, all the time, there's so many situations like that in our lives. Like, it might be a pivotal moment, it might be dangerous, but you know, we're called to that calling, or we're in that time and place, all that, you know, we're there for in the kingdom for such a time as this. It could just be to warn people, you know, it could just be to share the gospel, but we all have a calling. So then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai. So she agrees. She's going to do it, okay? Go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me, neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther commanded him. Okay, so he did all this, and here is where, you know, she's a type of Christ, because she puts herself in that spot and intercedes for all the people to save their lives. And in that, you know, critical place to risk her life for this. So anyway, that's a type there where she is a type of Christ. Okay, so now we get to this part, and we're at 34, so I'm going to again stop and make the next video. I'll be right back.